Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Thinklete Podcast. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Coach Werther Marciales. He is the founder of the Fellowship Jiu-Jitsu in Sarasota, Florida, here locally where we live. And he's been a tremendous mentor and advocate to my sons. But I thought Coach Werther would be a great guest so we could talk about the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the neurodivergent and neurotypical athletes and community. So welcome.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate you having me on, man. And it's been an absolute pleasure to coach your boys. Calvin and Lucas are great kids. And, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about what some of their challenges were. But I think many parents, both of neurotypical and neurodivergent kids, share those same challenges. So happy to dive into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start off. So I'm curious, right? And I'm sure the folks listening to this will be curious too. As someone as seasoned in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as you are, I'm curious how it came into your life as a young kid.
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually started with Taekwondo when I was a very, very young kid. I have ADHD myself. It's something I've been struggling and dealing with my entire life, basically. When I was a young child, I was not particularly good at paying attention in class. I ran into my old martial arts instructor, several years later when I was a young adult. And I asked him, I was like, so I wasn't a good student, was I? And he was like, well, trying to do the nice thing. You were distracted a lot, and it was hard to keep you on task, But I did take an enjoyment from moving my body physically and learning those different things. I loved Taekwondo, and that's something that's very common, I think, for kids that have ADHD or have trouble focusing. Is they may not be paying attention at many parts of the class, but that doesn't mean that they're not enjoying it. It doesn't mean that they're not moving their bodies and learning in that way. And that's kind of how it was like for me. So I did that for about 3 years. And then a couple years later, when I transitioned into high school, I was a very small kid. I was like 94 pounds, when I was 14. I was very tiny. And I was like, you know what? I know I don't have nearly the self-defense capabilities that I want to have. I want to have strength and confidence. And so I decided to start wrestling. And that was very difficult. I lost my first 19 wrestling matches in a row before I won my very first one. So I went my entire freshman season, losing every single one, getting a few forfeits for the team. So I'm sure they appreciated me for that. They got those free 6 points. But I didn't actually win my first match until my sophomore year. I was a little bit bigger at that time. I was like 110 pounds instead of 94. But going through that struggle where you're in the training room, and that first year I got one takedown in the training room. Like, that's how bad I was. I was not very good. I was not very aware of my body. I had zero talent. Everything was built by being just extremely stubborn and not wanting to stop because, operating under some kind of faith that if I just keep doing this, eventually I'll get better, right? So sophomore year, had a much better year. Junior year, had a better year than that. Senior year, had a better year than that. I was, decent, at wrestling, but not like state place or level or anything like that. Then when I went to college, I still wanted to continue building my athleticism. So I was lifting weights at the time, so for about 2 years of college, I was lifting weights. But lifting weights is kind of boring. It's exciting to hit PRs and build your strength and whatnot. But I missed what I had in wrestling, which was really just the grind, the building of mental toughness, the building of physical skills beyond just strength. So I decided to do a free trial at an MMA gym in Tallahassee, which was called Train Fight Win. And I was immediately sold. I was like, oh, you're telling me this is like wrestling, but I get to choke people? This is the best thing ever, right? So ever since then, I've been a diehard jiu-jitsu practitioner, coach now, advocate for it. My first 7 years of training, roughly, I was a twice a day, 5-6 day a week person with extra training on the weekends sometimes. And I I was a competitor. I competed 1 to 2 times a month, probably for the first 6 years at least of my jiu-jitsu career. And then I decided to open up my academy, and teaching was its own challenge. It's something that I had already done for about 3 years before I opened up my own academy. But teaching presents its own challenges. And you have to immediately recognize when you're a teacher, when you're a coach, is that your needs come second, right? Your needs and your, personal ambitions for jiu-jitsu, it comes second to the class that you're teaching and the kids and the adults and whoever you have that's under your guidance, right? So you need to make sure that what you're doing is furthering their instruction. And so I had to stop rolling during open mat because I was coaching, right? So instead of rolling with my students, which I still do occasionally, it's more beneficial if I just take that time and I stay afterwards and I coach them through their roles. Because now I'm instructing 2 people at the same time. I'm giving advice back and forth. I can watch multiple teams at the same time. I'm not focused on my own game because I'm not actually training. And so for the student, that's more beneficial. So that transition from, working on your individual progression to just focusing on your students was difficult at first, but it's something that now I love. I love teaching more than practicing jiu-jitsu at this point. And I have a lot of practice with it under my belt. And that's my journey of how I got into jiu-jitsu. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu a little over 11 years, 4 years of wrestling. I'm 31. So that's 15 years, half my life so far.
Yep. Very cool. Very cool. I'm curious, when you were getting into wrestling and talking about kind of, all of the, I don't want to say struggles, but all the failure that you were experiencing while you were, developing, what was the type of coaching that you were getting to keep you motivated, to continue to give you opportunity to overcome that adversity and overcome that failure and continue to encourage your development versus saying, hey, sorry, this isn't for you?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I had a few coaches that were in the program at the time, in the Freedom High School program. So Brian Chevalier was the head coach, and then Bernard St. Hillian was the assistant coach. But I built quite a rapport with Bernard. He was young at the time. He was like 20. He was like 22. And his mentality behind it was like, I don't care, suck it up, come to practice every day, right? Like if I went a couple of days without coming to practice once, and he got on me. I was like, dude, I had like 2 AP exams like that I had to prepare and study for. I had all these projects, and he's like, I don't give a shit. Everyone else is here. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm trying my best not to curse.
All good. No, you're all good.
But that's how he talked. He was like, I don't care. Everyone else was here. So I was like, all right, there's no excuse. I have to train. Right. So, he was a good role model for me. He pushed me, even though I was not very good at all. Right. Like not very good at all. He gave sort of like the tough love encouragement. It's like, listen, if you quit, if you stop coming to practice, you'll never be good. Mm-hmm. Right. The only thing you can do is just keep coming and keep training. Right. So in a very, in that very tough way, he was like, look, you just got to keep training. You got to do it. And that's what I tell my kids, when they train. I've said it so often that they all know the number of matches that I lost before I won my first one. I'm like, listen, guys, for those of you guys who are competing, for those of you guys who aren't very good, okay, I promise you won't have to lose 19 matches in a row before winning your very first one, right?
But I think what I'm getting is that, and you do a great job of this with your instruction, is whether a kid is ADHD, neurodivergent, you were being held to the same standards as your teammates, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe you were neurotypical. And what you do is the same thing in your studio now, today. And that's something from a parent's perspective, as somebody who signed my boys up to do your classes, that's something I really respect and admire that I saw from you and your fellow instructors.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of things underlying that are really important. So one is that life in general is not going to be easier on anybody that is neurodivergent simply because they're neurodivergent. They're going to face the same challenges. They're going to face the same treatment as everyone else, sometimes worse treatment. So it doesn't serve them to hold them to a lower standard, right? Because holding them to a lower standard would do a couple things. One, it makes them think they don't need to work as hard. Two, it makes their peers resent them because they're like, why are they getting special treatment and I'm not, right? And so, one thing that you want to do is you want social cohesion behind all the students that you're training. And if you uphold everyone to one standard, right? And, you have a positive attitude, you correct and you discipline when necessary, but then afterwards you go back to a neutral affect and you get them to start working back in class. The kids respond very well to that, right? So one thing that kids, and I'm talking like as young as 4 and 5, they have a very strongly developed sense of fairness already. They can immediately see when one kid is being treated differently than another, right? And they pick up on that, right? And if you allow yourself to engage in that behavior, if you pick favorites, right, or if you just have kids that you're just always on for whatever reason, right, they can pick up on the difference and they will resent you for it, right? Both the kid getting treated that way, both the kid getting the better treatment will resent you for it because their peers will resent them and their peers will resent you too. So that's why I tell all my coaches, like, hey, I don't care, I don't care what personality or what neurodivergent traits like a student is bringing in, like they get the same treatment, right, as everybody else. And it's for those reasons.
Sure. One of the things that we have heard outside of the sports world and in the sports world is just the benefit of positive praise, right? And positive encouragement for these young athletes, whatever sport they're doing. But what I noticed from some of the best coaches that I've been around that have coached my kids or other kids or even coached at higher levels is there's always that direct feedback. It could be very direct, but then there's always positive acknowledgement about the next opportunity. So meaning if you have a correction over a move that you're teaching that day and the kid is continuously not getting it right, and then they've tried maybe 5-10 times and some of the frustration maybe from you or your coaches is starting, there's that correction and it's authoritative, but then whether it's they finally get it right the next rep, or maybe they get it right 10 minutes later when they are rolling with a kid. I always notice that you guys always catch that and you always are able to then call out the positive there. And that's something that as a parent, if I'm looking for, hey, what do I want? Who do I want my coach to play or my kid to play for? Or what program do I want to sign my kid up for? That's something that I look for.
Yeah. And I think you're right to look for that. So there's a couple things that come with this, right? One is, what you're describing, I call the sandwich compliment, right? So you start with like, if a kid is struggling with a move, for instance, right? Or maybe they're live drilling and they execute something, and it's somewhat incorrect, right? You start with like, hey, you did this element of it good. I need you to work on this. So we're going to drill this down and work on this, right? But overall, you're doing a great job with the other things, right? So I sandwich the correction in between it. So this is especially useful for a kid that does not respond well to criticism and correction, because you sandwich it with praise, and then it's like sugarcoating a pill. It just goes down easily, and then it's easier to just continue working with them without them getting overly frustrated and still trying to work on the problem, right? And what you're talking about, right? Listen, when you're working on a kid for 10 minutes to get something right, like sometimes, right, that frustration does start to seep through from the coach's side, right? But ultimately, right, the reason we're working with that kid for 10 minutes is we want them to have that degree of success from eventually getting it to where they're like, wow, I struggled with this for a while, but I was able to eventually get it. Right. And so that is super, super important. Like, I don't want the kid to leave class thinking that they didn't make any improvements, right, in what they were doing. So even if it was just like, maybe they couldn't hit it live, but when we were trying to work with them, they were able to do it by themselves, right, after however long we were working with them. That's progress, right? And progress needs to be praised.
Yep.
It's very, very important that progress gets praised. So something as simple as like, hey, good job, man. I saw you hit that. Or just give them like, dude, you did that all by yourself. High five,
Yep.
right? Like something as simple as that reinforces that the effort was worth it, right? So yeah, when you're coaching, right, sometimes you will have those frustrating moments, and it's not frustration at the kid, right? It's a frustration of like, okay, how do I properly convey what I want their body to do so that they can pick up on this and learn it, right? And sometimes, if you're a coach, right, that may come off, right, a little bit negative. And so you have to you most definitely have to do that overcorrection afterwards and say like, hey, dude, that's awesome that you got this. Like, you worked super hard on that. That's great. And I work on my coaches and myself, right, on making sure that, hey guys, listen, when you're issuing corrections and you're working with kids, neutral affect, right? When you have to discipline, right, you can have negative affect for that moment, but after that moment's passed and they've done their squats or their push-ups or whatever else, then you go back to neutral affect. And then when obviously they do something that's praiseworthy, you always praise it, right? It's just like teaching a young kid something, right? Is like, you correct the bad behavior and then you reinforce and praise the good behavior. Same thing in class when it comes to technique, when it comes to how they're drilling and working with each other, a super important component of jiu-jitsu because it is something you do with a training partner. So it goes beyond just your technical knowledge, but it's also like, hey, are you being a lit noodle and just falling over when your partner's doing the move? Because that's not particularly helpful to them, right? They need like a basic level of base so that they can learn the proper mechanics, right? Are you resisting too hard and being a pain in the butt and making it harder for them to work, right? Because when you're just memorizing the moves, right, you got to let them get those reps, okay? We're going to do the live rolling, and that's when you can go hard, right? When we get to the live rolling, are you properly using your body and moving the right way such that you're not just, exploding into your partner in an uncontrolled way and then potentially kneeing them in the head, right? Or something like that. Those are all things that you have to, discipline and correct when they do something that they're not supposed to do. Then when you see them doing it properly, right, you praise that, right? The worst thing you can do is make a correction, get them to do something right, and then ignore it, or worse, punish it.
Sure.
Right.
So now those are great points. It all makes sense. Let's talk about the environment, right? When you walk in the door of your studio, there's a certain level, there's a certain tone that comes with that, because there's a certain amount of respect that your students need to show. And so I remember, and I'm going to use this as an example, we had an experience, I remember, with my older son, Calvin, where he was coming off of a pretty bad day at school, and walked in through the door. And I believe you were standing there and went to give him a high five or a handshake to say, basically, hey buddy, welcome, or, welcome him in. And he walked right by you and he didn't even acknowledge your handshake. And, I think obviously then, you, as we mentioned earlier, you didn't lower any expectations. You were very aggressive and abrasive in that moment that he made a mistake and he needed to come back and he needed to correct his mistake and shake your hand and then go on his way. And so you handled that situation as you would handle any athlete, whether neurodivergent or not.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, knowing that behavior from Calvin in that scenario obviously comes across as he's being defiant or he's being disrespectful. But at the same time, that's not, his brain isn't wired the same way. So I'm curious, because you were very open and forthcoming about, you having ADHD and kind of some of the aspects that you have had to overcome throughout your life. That aspect of, respect and discipline and, whether you're treating your coaches with respect, your opponents with respect, just the, putting your shoes away as you do in your studio, like things like that, right? Leaving the mats clean and cleaning up after yourself. Like, how do you incorporate that in your entire environment? Because I think that's just another component. We've talked a lot about the physical aspects here, but when we talk about the social, the emotional, and the environmental aspects of what you create, that's pretty neat to me, and I think that's
absolutely. We can touch on that. I want to touch on one other thing that you said, which I think is key here. It's really important, right? Calvin did not intend to disrespect,
sure.
Right? In his mind, he's just like, I'm just having a bad day. I kind of want to just be by myself, and I don't want to deal with social interaction, right? But the reality of every social interaction that you have, and this is a lesson that I've learned, because I'm an introverted person, and for the longest time before I started my business, right, is like I would engage in social interactions and I would do things that unintentionally conveyed like, oh, this person doesn't care about me, this person's rude, et cetera, right? The reality is that people will judge you by how your actions come across, not by your intentions. And that's true throughout your life. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you have ADHD. It doesn't matter if you're easily distractible. It doesn't matter if you're introverted, extroverted, right? The world is going to judge you based on how they perceive your actions, not how you perceive your actions. So because of that, it's really important that, for instance, right, if a kid comes in and I'm talking to them and I'm being like, hey, what's up, man? High five. Like, if they ignore me, I need to convey to them like, hey, buddy, that's rude. Right? Like you can't do that, because, if they do that later on in their life, like when they're working, right, or even more so if they're in frequent work situations in which they have to interact with others, that's going to come across negatively. It's going to lower their potential as a worker, and it's going to make it harder for them to interact, coordinate with everybody else, right? And it's not their intention to do that. It's just that they haven't learned those skills. So that's why it's so important, because I've struggled with that too, right? Like, everyone who knew me when I was in my early 20s is like, oh, this guy's super awkward.
And can I ask you real quick, like, what are some key, like, because for the parents that are going to be listening to this, right? Like, what are some key takeaways that you'd be able to give them that has helped you, right? Because again, we're talking about my son who's 9 years old, right? But now I believe you said you're 31 or 32.
31. Yep.
31. So
going on 32.
Yeah. So, what has helped you, throughout the different periods of your life to get to the point where you're now? Because the eye contact you make, the firmness of your handshake, the respect that you show, to be very honest with you, is a goal and what we're hoping for that our sons are able to do when they're in their 30s and, before then. But so how did you go from, hey, point A over here to now I'm 31 and I'm over here,
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a couple things. So one, I think it's the mentality of like, okay, this is a skill that I suck at and I need to work on it and get better. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to require me to do uncomfortable things and go outside my comfort zone. I can't tell you how much social anxiety I would get in high school. And even in my early college years, how much social anxiety I would get being in situations with strangers and then things like that. But the best way to overcome that is to continue to put yourself in it. And then kind of do the way that I think about it is like, okay, how can I improve in how I come across to people, right? And if you have people that are honest in your life about that, you're way more likely to succeed. If you have people that, for the sake of not hurting your feelings, are lying to you about how you're coming across, then you will never succeed. Right. So it's most important that, you as a parent, me as a coach, right, to everyone that we train or that we work with, that we're honest about how they come across, right? Because if you're not, then that person can't take the steps that they need to take to fix it. So, social interaction did not come naturally to me until I was like in my mid-20s. Like, opening the business forced me to learn a lot of things really, really quickly.
Sure.
But obviously for Calvin, or any other person that we want to develop those skills, we want to do it as young as possible. And the best way to do it is to just be honest about how they're coming across. Like, hey, buddy, you didn't make eye contact, right? Like, you got to make eye contact when you talk to people. Because it's a sign of respect. It's a sign that you're listening to them, right? You have to acknowledge what they're telling you. You can't just be off in your own world all the time. When someone's speaking to you, you have to engage with them when they're speaking to you. Because this is not just about how they're going to be perceived with strangers, right? This is also how they're going to be perceived with the people that they're close to, their closest relationships, right? When Calvin, is 18 or he's an adult, right? He may go off and he may find a girlfriend, and he may find someone that he really connects with and wants to be with. How much more difficult is it going to be for him to have a substantial relationship if he's not making eye contact with her when she's speaking, right? Or she's telling him a story about her day and he's off in his own world, right? And I'm using Calvin as an example, but that's been me in the past, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, on just an abstract way, I'm like, yeah, I love the people that are around me, right? I really care about them. But in my actions and how I was coming across sometimes, now bird's eye view, hindsight 2020, 10 years later, I can say, wow, in my actions, I really didn't demonstrate that, right? And they might have felt like I didn't care about them. So you have to be honest with your kids about this stuff. It's super, super important. It's not something that's trivial. It really matters. And it's why when the kids come in, like, all my coaches, right? We say their name, give them a high five, or like, hey, dude, it's great to see you, right? And it is great to see them. We want them to be in class and training and working hard and getting better at their skills. And we also want to make sure that not only are they developing the physical jiu-jitsu skills, but they're building the mental toughness. Right. They're building a good mental model of how the world works and what proper social interaction looks like, because, there's so much that goes on in a jiu-jitsu class that can be a teachable moment, because you're doing a very intense physical activity with somebody else, and you have to negotiate how much force you're using, how you're using it, right? Making sure that it's appropriate, right? We're still being competitive and trying to win, but at the same time, we're being controlled. We're not trying to do anything that might potentially hurt somebody. Yep. And how to deal with when we accidentally do that, right? How do we address that? Those are all lessons that the kids are also learning in class, and it's going to model how they interact with everybody else. And I think that's why kids that do martial arts, that do those hard things, that do interact with training partners in that way, they tend to mature a lot more quickly, especially in the emotional, relational skills, which are absolutely crucial for life success. Yep. I'll leave you with one last thing, because I know I've been talking for a while. The most important thing to me when a kid walks in, right, is not actually do they respect me or do they respect the coaches, right? The thing that sets me off the most is when a kid disrespects their mom or their dad in front of me, right, in the academy. That I don't tolerate at all, right? I don't tolerate the other stuff, but I definitely don't tolerate that. And I frame it to the kid every time so that they can understand what they're doing. I'm like, listen, dude, there's nobody that loves you, cares about you, has you on their mind as much as your mom and dad. So you are not allowed to disrespect them, right? I don't care how bad of a day you're having, right? They're the reason that you have clothes on your back. They're the reason that you're here at jiu-jitsu in the first place, because they're paying for it. Oftentimes they're driving you to class and taking time out of their day to do it. And they're watching you because they care about you and they want you to get better. They're also making sure that they go to work and that there's a roof over your head, that you have food, right? Everything that you guys have in your life that's comfortable is because of them. And I say it like that, and I'm very frank about it, so that they understand is like, hey, you're not allowed to disrespect mom and dad. Yep. Like,
and then at the end of your classes, you always have, they show a sign of respect by bowing towards their parents.
Yep. We make the kids bow to their parents, not us. Right. because they're already showing respect to us through the class because they're following the structure that we've set, right? So they don't need to bow to us at the end, right?
Yeah.
But when they're in class, right, it's always useful for the parents to have a third party, to have another person, right, reinforce that, hey, you guys need to respect your parents.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because you guys are here because they love and care about you. Because Absolutely. They want you to have fun, yes, but also they want you to develop all of these skills, which are going to be important for your life. So that's something that I did from day one when I started my academy. Is I would have the kids bow to their parents, and sometimes I have the parents tell me is like, "Hey, so and so showed disrespect to me at home today. I was wondering if you could talk to them about that." And I was like, "Absolutely, I would love to talk to them about that," because sometimes kids need to hear it from someone that they're not as comfortable around, right? Because oftentimes, that disrespect or that bad behavior happens because they're very comfortable in their home. And, maybe they need it to hear it from their teacher or their coach who they see for a few hours out of the week. And that really reinforces it. It's like, okay, it's not just mom and dad, right? Like these other adults in my life that are important, they agree.
Absolutely. That resonates a ton with us for sure. One of the last things I want to hit on was really just kind of circling back to the concept of overcoming adversity and how you set up scenarios to do that for these kids. So again, to use our own boys as an example, one thing that Calvin struggled with was whenever he was in a, rolling with a partner and they were having, maybe more of a times, simulated match in class and he would lose, there would always be emotion that would come with that through tears. That was one scenario. The second scenario would be if he would lose something all of a sudden out of nowhere, he would have an injury or something would hurt. Right. So it was like, he's
very common.
Right. So it's like, is it like an excuse of like, oh, well, I'm hurt and that's why I lost? Or is it the physical pain was what it was? It's more so the mental aspect of being able to deal with the fact that I lost, understand why I lost, and then try to improve that, in the next round or next match. You create scenarios like that. I know that's a concept that I've seen several kids struggle with, to be honest.
Oh, it's super common. Yeah. It's super common. The getting upset after losing in particular, right? Super common. And it's not just because, kids have they don't frame failure properly. That's a big part of it. But it's also because, in jiu-jitsu, failure is very much in your face, right? Mm-hmm. It's like failure means I got taken down. I got held down and I couldn't get out, right? And that sucks. No one likes to lose in a jiu-jitsu context, especially in the beginning, right? But it's part of it. If you don't do it, if you don't go through it, you're not going to improve. But because it's so physical and aggressive, it also provides an opportunity for the kid to frame failure properly in that context, which they can then apply to any other context, right? So if you can get manhandled in jiu-jitsu and be okay with it, right, and not react emotionally when it happens to you, how calm and, properly diagnosing, other failures in your life are you going to be when, you've been manhandled and you can deal with that, right? So now all of a sudden, that test that you didn't do so good on, it's not the end of the world, right? Now, it's like, okay, I need to do a better job studying, right? I need to fix certain things. And you set about doing that because you've already experienced failure in a context that sucks, which, again, like being manhandled sucks. And you've processed and dealt with that in a mature way. If you can do that, then you can process failure in a good way in any other context. And ultimately, like those skills, when it comes to mental toughness and resilience, grit, fortitude, dealing with failure properly and putting in the proper context, those are more important than the physical skills because the physical skills to a degree are perishable if you don't train them and practice them. But the mental skills will stay with you as you tackle other challenges and problems. So of everything that we teach, I think that is the most important. The physical skills are no doubt important. It's important to develop a kid's athleticism and their self-defense capabilities. But if you give them proper tools and strategies for dealing with challenges and setbacks, and I'm saying like both in a planning context and both in an emotional context, it's going to be way more beneficial than anything else. So the crying after losing, that's a super common thing for kids that are like under 8 years old, or even sometimes 8 years old. That's a very common thing, especially if they've never dealt with like such a physical degree of failure and what that feels like. That's a very common thing. And then when that happens, we always pretty much do the same thing. We're like, it's like, all right, hey buddy, listen, you lost. It's not the end of the world, right? But you need to keep going. Mm-hmm. You have to keep going. You have to keep persisting. You can't use this as a reason to not train, because if you don't train because of this, you're not going to get better. And if you're not getting better, then you're just going to continue to fail, right? And the goal of failure is to, go through it as much as you need to, but eventually, right, rise up and get better.
For sure.
So we tell them to get back in there, right? If the crying continues and persists for a while, right, then I'll tell them to suck it up sometimes and just push through it. Like push through your emotions and keep grappling and just work to overcome it. We've had a good degree of success in getting kids to eventually stop crying and process failure better. I'm thinking of several in my mind right now, but I don't want to call them out. But they started very emotional, when they would lose, and you would just see gradually over time, over several months, right? It gets better and better, right? They're crying less often, right? Like up until the point where now, recently, like, one kid got a little bit hurt, like he landed kind of hard, got the wind knocked out of him, and just stayed calm and sucked it up and kept going and didn't cry. And for that kid in particular, I was like, oh my God, that's huge, right? Yeah. Because this is someone that would cry, not because they were hurt, but just because they lost. So for them to lose and get a little bit hurt, get the wind knocked out of them, and still like just wait a few seconds and then get back up and keep going, like that was major progress, Yep.
That's so important, because that's not, hey, they won their match. That's just something that you found along the way that was a small win that kind of stacked up, and all of a sudden now this kid is making a really big breakthrough emotionally to be able to control him or herself in that situation. And that's the focus on the development versus the result is crucial. And that's pretty neat.
100%. I mean, look, we've got a lot of kids that compete. We've got their medals on the wall, and all that stuff is great. By the way, one thing I think is really important: we don't let any participation medals go up on the wall. They have to win at least one match in competition. That is important. And sometimes kids will come up and tell me like, hey, Coach Werther, can I put this on the wall? I'm like, well, buddy, you didn't win any matches to get that. Right. So everyone else that put a medal up on the wall was earned.
Right.
So here's what I want you to do. You can keep it at home if you want. Right. But I want you to just work hard in the room, go back out there. And when you win a match to get the medal, then you can put it on the wall. Right.
For sure.
And then guess what? They do that. They work hard. And then when they earn the medal, they're way more proud of it and way more excited to put it up on the wall, right? Because they understand that, oh, now I earned it by winning and beating someone, and not just showing up and, getting a participation medal. But we have those on the wall and stuff. And I like displaying it for the kids. For my adults, I don't care. It's
you're holding everybody the same expectation. You're holding everybody the same expectation.
I'm holding everybody the same expectation. Mm-hmm. And for the adults, it's like, you guys are 18 or over, right? Like, be proud of your stuff and keep it home. But for the kids, I put it up because I think it's important to acknowledge their progress and accomplishments. Number one. But number two, more importantly than that, more importantly than the medals, right? What is ultimately going to help a child succeed in life, right? Is it getting first place at a local jiu-jitsu tournament? Or is it making a breakthrough in their emotional development to where they can handle problems maturely, responsibly, and without giving up when they're put through hard times, right? The latter is way more important.
Absolutely.
Way more important, and that's not even close.
Absolutely.
So, I 100% celebrate those things that we see in the training room when a kid is improved in those contexts, because at the end of the day, that's what matters more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it couldn't be more right. So this has been an awesome discussion, and I'm glad I didn't bore you. No, I want to ask just kind of one last question, right? To tie this back to really the whole theme, right, of this episode, if you could summarize the benefits, particularly of jiu-jitsu, for a parent who said, because there's probably parents out there right now, maybe their kid is young, maybe they're not, maybe they're older, and they're not able to find the right environment or the right fit that's conducive to that child or athlete's brain and skill set. Maybe they've tried different sports and, it's just not working out for various reasons. But why do you think it is so beneficial for a neurodivergent athlete to gravitate towards jiu-jitsu, and then the benefits that they get out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the primary benefits are, I'll list a few of them. The first one I would say is comfort with physical interaction with their peers. I think that is super important. That's not necessarily something an ADHD child would struggle with, but definitely ASD1. That's a very common thing where they don't like being touched and things like that. And this is a way where they can be gradually made to be more comfortable with it. And I have methods on how to do this, but when it comes to building anything like that, like resilience or comfort in an environment, you just need to gradually put them in a slightly more uncomfortable environment than they want to be in. So if their bubble is here of what they're comfortable with, you go just outside that bubble, and you do that a few times, right? And then that bubble gets a little bigger, and then you go just outside that bubble again, right? And that bubble gets a little bit bigger, right? That's what I found to be really successful with kids that struggled with that in particular, which is not so much ADHD, it's more ASD1, but that's proven to be successful. So comfort with physical interaction, social interaction with their peers. This one is huge. Kids don't understand what it means to be neurodivergent, right? And again, even more so than adults, they judge based on action and not intent, right? So teaching a child, right, the proper way to be a good training partner, right? How to interact and be respectful with their peers, right? Getting them in a social environment in which they can crack jokes and have fun and things like that. And while doing something in a physical context, I think is crucial for them as well. And then it's the mental skills that we already talked about. Overcoming failure, right? Being judged the same as everybody else. This one is super important. I strongly suggest to parents of neurodivergent kids, put them in environments where the standard for them is not going to be lower. Because one, if they see that it's lower, they're going to think that they can get away with more, or it'll just lower their confidence because they realize they're not being judged the same as everybody else, right? Imagine if I gave someone a jiu-jitsu belt because I felt bad for them, right? And they worked really hard, right? Maybe they'd been coming for a couple of years and they still hadn't earned their gray white, and I just gave it to them because I felt bad, right? Is that going to make that kid feel better to know that they got a belt, not because they had earned it through skill acquisition, but because I felt bad for them? No, it'll make them feel horrible. Are they going to feel better because they were allowed onto a team because they were neurodivergent and not because they had achieved it with their skill? No, it's going to make them feel horrible, right? And when they're not a kid and they're an adult, like we talked about before, that's what they're going to be judged on. So for parents looking for a sports program to get their kids into, that is one thing I would strongly suggest, right? If your child is neurodivergent, make sure that you let the coach know, and let the coach know that you do not want them treated differently than any of the other kids. Give them knowledge on what their particular issue may be, right? Of course, but make sure that the standard is the same. Because it's going to be so much easier for that kid to integrate socially with their peers if it is. Like I said, kids have a very sharp sense of fairness. They really do. Like, it's like when we're doing the kids parties, right? Like a kid will be like, hey, he got 2 cookies and you said 1 cookie per student. And I'm like, all right, well, I did see him take that second cookie. I'm sorry. I did say 1 cookie per person. So I'll make sure I go over there and I tell them that's not okay. Right. It's like they pick up on that stuff like super easily and quickly. So you have to make sure that you're being fair. And for parents, it's really important that the program that they're putting their kids in is fair, right? Like give the instructor as much knowledge as they can to make sure that they can coach your kid properly, but make sure the standard is the same for them as everybody else. So those are the things that I would recommend to parents, on the specific benefits of jiu-jitsu and that physical interaction. And those are the things that I would just generally look for in any sports program.
Amazing. No, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, your input, experience. It's been super helpful. And I'm sure that parents that listen to this will understand the benefits and have a better plan and direction moving forward because of all the things you've said. So I really appreciate it.
I'm glad to hear that. For anyone listening, I'll just say one thing, because there are lots of jiu-jitsu academies out there. There's lots of martial arts academies out there generally. I would say the most important thing you need to look for is the culture at the academy, right? Whether you're training there or whether your son or daughter is going to be training there, look at the culture, right? Look at the head coach, right? Are they super egotistical about what they've done and it's all about them? How do they treat their staff, right? How do they treat the kids when they're teaching class, right? Is the class structured? Is it well organized? Are they moving around and going team to team and making sure everybody, has a technique properly? Are they only focusing on the kids that are more advanced and leaving the other kids to just wither, right? Like these are all really, really important tells for whether your kid is going to get the same level of attention and care as everybody else. Just generally look into their personality, look into their character. It's really important. You want someone that embodies the traits that you would like your son and daughter to eventually embody as they grow up.
For sure.
That's more important than anything else. It's more important than price. It's more important than how many mats they have, how nice the academy looks, right? Those aren't unimportant things, but the cultural aspect is by far the most important. So for parents out there, no matter what city you're in, keep that in mind. And if you go to an academy and you're not sure, look around, it's like see how the various academies teach their classes and then pick the one that you think is going to care the most about your kid, and is going to work hard on delivering a structured program so that they can thrive and excel. That's what I would look for.
Perfect. No, thanks so much. That makes sense. And I really appreciate your time, Werther.
Appreciate it, Derek. I hope I didn't go too long.
No, you've been amazing. And we'll talk soon, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate this. This was fun.
All right, Werther.